15 years of silence, one dying phone call, and a locked drawer full of letters my mother never let me read. What do you say to the man who abandoned you when you realize he never stopped trying to come back? I'm Marissa Cole, and I was exactly halfway through a mug of lukewarm chamomile tea when my phone rang. No caller ID, just the cold, insistent trill of something unresolved. I almost let it go to voicemail. Ellie was in the next room humming to her dolls, sunlight angling through the window in perfect slants, and the air was finally still after a long, restless Oregon rain. Peace was a precious, rare animal in my life, and this call, I could feel it, was a predator. But curiosity's a sharper claw than fear sometimes. "Hello?" I said, cautious. A man's voice, gravelly, uncertain, the kind that hesitates before each word like it's about to change its mind. "Is this Marissa Cole?" My stomach flipped. That name in that tone wasn't from now. It was from some dusty corner of childhood, before I learned how to keep my voice calm and my heart locked. "Yes." "This is going to sound strange," the voice said. "My name's Greg Temple. I'm a nurse at St. Vincent's VA in Sacramento. I was asked to reach out on behalf of a patient, Raymond Cole. He's your father." Everything stopped. The mug slipped from my hand and thudded against the rug. Ellie's humming vanished. Or maybe my hearing did. My body was present, but my mind. It had taken a sharp detour back 15 years. "He's in hospice care," the man continued, not waiting for me to respond. "End-stage pancreatic cancer. He asked for you specifically, said he didn't want to die without seeing his daughter." I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "Miss Cole?" "I heard you," I said finally, but my voice sounded like it belonged to someone watching me from a distance. "Thank you." I hung up before he could say more. The silence afterward felt accusing. I stared at the rug like it had the answers. 15 years. Not a card. Not a call. Nothing but the absence of a man who once tossed me onto his shoulders and spun me until the world was a blur of sky and laughter. Now he wanted to see me? I stood up, almost involuntarily, pacing to the window. The fir trees outside swayed in a sudden gust, and it looked like they were arguing. I placed a hand on the glass. It was cold. My hands were shaking, not violently, but enough to know this was no small thing. There had been so many versions of this moment in my head over the years. The reunion fantasy, the courtroom confrontation, the awkward coffee shop chat where he fumbled with apologies. But not this. Not a hospital bed. Not a countdown clock. I pulled out my phone and played the voicemail again, this time from Raymond himself. "Marissa, it's your dad. I know I have no right. I know what I did or didn't do. But if you get this, I don't want to die alone." He sounded small, smaller than I'd ever imagined him. I had memorized his absence so completely that I forgot he could shrink into a man who sounded like he was whispering into regret. I put the phone down and sat on the floor, knees against my chest. Ellie peeked in then, her eyes wide and questioning. "Mommy?" "I'm okay, baby," I lied, reaching out to her. She curled into my lap without hesitation, warm and solid and real. Her hair smelled like strawberries and crayons. I held her close and closed my eyes. I didn't know if I was going to Sacramento. I didn't know what I felt. Rage? Resentment? A desperate ache I didn't know I still carried? But I did know this. Something old, something sealed tight and buried deep, had just cracked wide open. I was 10 the day he left, and I didn't know what silence could feel like until then. It wasn't loud. It didn't announce itself. It just was. A kind of emptiness that stretched through our too small apartment, coiled into the corners, settled into the sink where dishes piled up because Mom couldn't bring herself to care anymore. Raymond Cole, he was never Dad again after that. Disappeared like a magic trick gone wrong. 1 minute there, tall and laughing, tossing Jonah in the air like a sack of potatoes and letting me steal sips from his beer when Mom wasn't looking. The next, gone. No fight, no note, just a rent check that didn't come, and a mailbox that started filling with final notices. We waited for him, in our own ways. Mom with the bitter silence and the stare out the window. Me with my flashlight and sneakers by the door, convinced he'd be back in time for bedtime stories. And Jonah, too little to understand, just kept asking, "When's Daddy coming back?" Until even that faded like chalk in the rain. It got bad fast. The landlord didn't care about missing fathers or hollowed-out families. We got evicted 2 months later. Jonah cried the first night in the motel because the sheets smelled like bleach and the vending machine wouldn't take our crumpled dollars. Mom didn't cry. She sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the off-white wall like she was trying to burn a hole through it. That was the year I learned how to lie with a smile. "I'm fine," I'd say when the school nurse asked about the bruises under my eyes from sleepless nights. "We're just moving a lot," I'd offer to teachers who wondered why my homework smelled like microwave burritos and cigarette smoke. I became the second adult in our family at 10 years old. It wasn't something I chose. It was a vacuum I stepped into because someone had to. I learned how to soothe Jonah when he cried for cartoons we couldn't watch because the TV was hawked. I learned how to navigate Mom's depression, her disappearing acts, into long naps and longer silences. I learned how to ration dollar store ramen for 3 people. I kept a journal back then, spiral-bound, pink with a heart lock I lost the key to. I wrote letters to Raymond I never meant to send. "Hi, Dad," I always began, like he'd just gone out for milk and forgot his way home. And then, one day, I stopped writing. The fantasy wore thin. The stories I told myself started feeling like betrayal. Because holding out hope for someone who walked away? That's its own kind of violence. By the time I was 16, I didn't say his name out loud. Not at school, not to Jonah, not even in my own head. It was easier that way, turning absence into armor. I got good at that, making pain useful, making it silent. People always said I was strong, like it was a compliment, but I knew better. Strength for me was just survival in better clothes. I must have listened to that voicemail a dozen times. Maybe more. Not all at once. It wasn't like a movie where the message plays and the heroine gasps and races out the door in some emotional whirlwind. Number I played it once, then again the next day, then in the parking lot after dropping Ellie off at kindergarten, then again, late at night, curled under a throw blanket like that voice might crawl out of the phone and sit beside me. "Marissa, it's your dad. I know I have no right." That line, that pathetic line. Every time I heard it, something different flared. Rage, then guilt. Then, worst of all, numbness. The kind of numbness that doesn't feel like peace, just the quiet knowledge that whatever you were holding back has already slipped through your fingers. I didn't tell anyone at first, not even Callie, and she's the one person in the world who's seen me sob through panic attacks and laugh so hard I spit wine onto her couch. I thought I could keep it contained, just shove it into the same dusty mental closet where I stored all the birthday cards I never got, the softball games he never saw, the broken promises I stopped waiting on. But grief doesn't respect boundaries, and neither does anger. That night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing my teeth, and caught sight of myself. Jaw clenched, eyes tight, hand gripping the toothbrush like it had done something wrong. And just like that, I snapped, threw it across the room, watched it bounce off the wall and land beside Ellie's step stool. Ellie. God. She was asleep in the next room, wrapped in unicorn sheets and the kind of innocence I had once, before it got carved out of me by a man who couldn't stay. I crept into her room, watched her chest rise and fall. Thought about what it means to be a parent, the kind who stays, the kind who doesn't vanish when things get hard. Then I went back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, my hands shaking so hard I had to press them between my knees. I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. There's no handbook for this. When your estranged ghost of a father calls from death's doorstep, asking for mercy he never gave. There's no section in therapy for that particular ache. But in that moment, I knew one thing with blistering clarity. This wasn't just about him. It was about me. What I'd built in his absence, what I'd buried, and what was now clawing its way back up, gasping for air. I wrote it down first. Not a decision, just a sentence. He wants to see me before he dies. Then under it, why now? Then, what do I owe him? It was how I've always processed. The page takes the weight before I do. The ink carries it better than my lungs can. I stared at the notebook, the words looking like someone else's confession, a stranger's grief. I thought about calling Callie, but it felt too big for a phone, too raw. So I waited. Waited until Sunday morning, when Ellie was at a playdate and the sky was that washed-out gray that makes you feel like you're inside a photograph of someone else's life. Callie arrived in sweatpants and a topknot, coffee in one hand, her other already reaching for the front door before I even opened it. "All right," she said, stepping inside. "You've got your journal face on. What's up?" I handed her the notebook. Let her read it. Watched her eyes scan the words, then lift to meet mine. "Jesus," she said softly. "After 15 years?" I nodded. My throat was too tight for speech. She sat on the couch, folding her legs under her, eyes sharp the way they get when she's choosing words like scalpels. "I'm not going to tell you what to do," she began, "but I will say this. Closure isn't kindness, it's hygiene." I blinked. "What?" She leaned forward. "It's like brushing your teeth. You don't do it to be nice to your teeth. You do it so rot doesn't spread, so things don't get infected. This, seeing him, might be the flossing of your soul." That made me laugh, which I hated her for and loved her for all at once. "But what if it opens up everything I've worked so hard to close?" I asked. "What if I walk in there and come out worse?" Callie's face softened. "Then you come back to me and we pick up the pieces. Again, like always." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think there was safety in the decision, some way to control the shape of what came next. But there isn't. There never is. I walked her to the door later, hugging her longer than usual. She squeezed back just as hard. "You don't have to forgive him," she whispered. "You just have to decide if this is something you need to see, for you, not for him, not for the ghost of him." After she left, I sat back down with the notebook. This time, I didn't write questions. I wrote the truth. I don't want to go. I don't want to feel whatever this will make me feel. But underneath it, in smaller letters, I added, "I might need to." Jonah's voice always tightens when we talk about him. Doesn't matter how many years pass, how many therapy sessions, or failed Thanksgiving truces. There's a tremor in his tone that never quite smooths out. "You're not seriously considering it," he said, flat, like a verdict. I was in my kitchen, phone pressed between my ear and shoulder, staring into the fridge like the answer might be hiding behind the almond milk. "I haven't decided," I said. "You shouldn't need to decide," Jonah snapped. "You owe him nothing, Riss, less than nothing. The man ghosted us like a bad Tinder date, and now he wants what? A cozy reunion tour on his deathbed? He's dying, Jonah." "So? So what? He didn't care if we starved. Didn't care when Mom broke down so hard she couldn't get out of bed for a week. Remember the motel with the hole in the wall? Remember the mice?" "I did. God, I did. Mom couldn't even say his name without choking on it," Jonah continued. "He didn't show up for your high school graduation, or mine, or Mom's funeral." That last one landed like a slap. I could almost hear the silence we both fell into. The weight of the years stacked between us, and the woman who'd held our broken little family together with duct tape and desperation. "I know," I whispered. "Believe me, I know." Jonah sighed. The anger was never just about Raymond. It was about me, too. Because I had always been the one to pick up the pieces, to make things look clean when they were anything but. I was the fixer, the one who forgave, the one who stayed soft. "You're going to go, aren't you?" he said, not as a question, but a resignation. "I don't know yet," I lied. "Don't give that man a minute of your life," he said. "Please, not after everything." Later, I sat at the dining table, fingers curled around a mug of lukewarm tea. Ellie was drawing hearts with wings on construction paper, her tongue poking out in concentration. "You okay, Mommy?" she asked, glancing up. "Yeah," I lied again, my smile slow and practiced. "Just thinking." I looked at her, this tiny person with my eyes and his curls, and felt something sharp twist inside. What would I want her to do if it were me? That question stayed with me all night. It didn't make anything clearer, but it did make one thing undeniable. Whatever choice I made, it would echo forward. And I had to make sure it didn't become another silence she'd have to explain someday. I wrote the rules down on a post-it and stuck it to the fridge. Not for anyone else, just for me. A talisman, a boundary in ink, 1 hour visit, no emotional obligations, no caretaking. That last one felt the most important. I wouldn't hold his hand. I wouldn't wipe his tears. I wouldn't be the nurse, the therapist, the daughter. I'd be a witness. That's it. Ellie would stay with Callie. I packed her little overnight bag with a note tucked in the front pocket, just in case she missed me. Be kind, be brave. Mommy loves you. She hugged me at the door like it was any other sleepover. No idea that I was walking into something raw and ancient. Maybe that was for the best. I stood in my hallway for a long time after Callie drove off, my car keys in one hand, my resolve in the other. I looked at the post-it again. This isn't about reconnecting. It was closure. The kind of closure you don't find in books or therapy. The kind you earn by standing face to face with the thing that broke you and saying, "You don't get to break me again." I took a breath, picked up my bag, locked the door behind me. I didn't look back. There was no playlist for this kind of drive. I kept the radio off. Let the silence stretch long and thick between me and the memory of the man I was going to see. The man who'd built a phantom version of himself in my head. Sometimes a monster, sometimes a ghost. Never quite real. I wouldn't give him the chance to become real again. Not fully. This visit was a wall. One last stone in the fortress I'd built. I whispered the rules to myself again, just to be sure. 1 hour, no obligations, no caretaking. This wasn't for him. It was for the girl he left behind. The girl who waited too many nights by a window, thinking porch lights were signs, and that love, if she waited long enough, would come back. It never did, but I was going now, not as that girl, as the woman who survived her. It started with a search for hospital paperwork. Raymond's name had been scrawled on a notepad by the phone, next to an address in Sacramento and a room number. I needed the actual admission details, insurance, doctor contacts, legal next of kin boxes checked. Not for sentiment, just logistics. Diane kept everything. Every tax return since 1991. Every school drawing Jonah and I ever made. Every empty prescription bottle from the worst years. So I climbed into her attic like a time traveler, flashlight in one hand, the smell of insulation and old paper pressing against my face. The file cabinet was there, in the corner beneath the eaves. Beige, dented, and humming with secrets. I opened it, expecting bills. Found memories. But it was the locked drawer at the bottom that stopped me cold. I didn't even know it had a lock. It was subtle, rusted from years of being unbothered. But the key was tucked inside a box of Christmas ornaments. Because of course it was. My mother hid pain next to tinsel. The drawer creaked open like it hadn't moved in decades. Inside were envelopes, dozens, all unopened, all addressed to me. My name, written in a slanted, clumsy hand, I recognized immediately. Raymond's handwriting, that broken script he used on birthday cards back when he still signed them Love, Dad. I couldn't breathe. They started in 2005. One postmarked 2 months after he left. The rest spaced out, years between some, months between others. And one on top, dated when I was 17, my senior year, the year I gave up waiting. I held it like it might dissolve. The paper inside crackled. The ink had smudged in places. Maybe water damage, maybe tears. "Marissa," it began, "I know you probably hate me. You should. I wanted to come back 100 times, but I thought you'd be better off if I didn't. Your mom, she made it clear I wasn't welcome. Said I'd only mess things up more. Maybe she was right. But not a day goes by that I don't think about you and Jonah. I just want you to know that, even if I never see you again, I never stopped being your father in here. There was a small sketch at the bottom, a lopsided drawing of a dog with big ears. He used to doodle them on my lunch napkins in elementary school. I'd forgotten. I sat there in that dusty attic, letter in hand, and cried like I hadn't in years. Because he had tried. Because my mother had hidden it. Because the betrayal was layered, and I didn't know who to be angry at first. I stayed up there for hours, reading every letter, tracing every curve of every sentence. The story I'd been told about my abandonment was starting to shift, and I wasn't sure what scared me more, what he did or what she did after. The road to Sacramento was familiar in the way trauma is familiar. Unwelcome but recognizable. Every stretch of highway a memory. The gas station where Jonah threw up orange soda after a road trip. The turnoff near Redding, where Mom once pulled over to cry so hard she forgot we were in the back seat. Places that had no business being sacred, but were burned into me anyway. I drove with the windows down. Let the air slap my face until I stopped thinking about letters and locked drawers. Until it was just me, the road, and the raw ache of everything I couldn't say out loud. I'd packed light. Just a weekend bag with jeans, a hoodie, the least emotional pair of shoes I owned. No photos, no keepsakes. Nothing that said, "I'm here to remember you." I wasn't. I practiced the conversation in my head, over and over. Why did you leave? Why didn't you fight? Why now? But every time I rehearsed it, the words felt like paper swords. Too sharp. Too flimsy. At a rest stop outside Red Bluff, I sat on a cracked bench and stared at a vending machine, watching the same packet of trail mix dangle on the edge of a coil that wouldn't let go. Stuck. Halfway between wanting and getting. That was me. Stuck. In this drive. In this choice. In this version of the story that was suddenly under revision. I called Callie. She didn't answer, but her voicemail chirped, "Hey, you know what to do." I didn't leave a message, just listened to her voice and let it be enough for now. Back on the road, the sky began to tilt toward evening. Sacramento came into view like a dare I couldn't back down from. I pulled into the hospital parking lot with my heart in my throat. The VA center was beige and tired-looking, like it had given up trying to be warm. I sat in the car, fingers white-knuckled on the steering wheel, breathing in tight bursts. 1 hour, that was the promise. Not for him, for me. Closure, not connection. I got out, locked the car, and walked toward the automatic doors like I wasn't walking into the past wearing new skin. Each step louder than the last. Each heartbeat shouting, "I'm not 10 anymore. I came on my own terms, and I'm not here for you. I'm here for her. The girl who waited. And this time, she doesn't wait alone." The hospital room was dim, a single window letting in the last of the afternoon light, painting the walls with shadows that moved like slow ghosts. Machines beeped with quiet insistence. The air smelled like antiseptic and fading breath. He was smaller than I remembered. Not just thinner, shrunk. A deflated version of the man who used to lift me onto his shoulders and whistle off-key on weekend walks. His body was failing, but it was his eyes that startled me most. He looked up when I entered, and for a second, confusion flickered. Then something heavier. Recognition, regret. "Marissa?" he said, like my name was a prayer he wasn't sure he deserved to speak. I stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed tight enough to bruise. "Yeah," I said, "it's me." He opened his mouth to say something else, but I beat him to it. "Say it straight," I said, voice like iron. "Why did you leave?" His lips trembled. He tried to sit up, then thought better of it. His hands clutched the blanket like it was the only solid thing he had left. "I thought about this moment," he said, voice hoarse. So many times. What I'd say, how I'd explain. "I don't need the script," I cut in. "Just the truth." He swallowed hard. I was ashamed. Of what? I shot back. Having kids? A wife? A life? No, he blinked. Of failing. Of not being enough. Of messing up so bad I couldn't see a way back. I shook my head. Pick one and own it. That shut him up. For a long minute, all I heard was the slow whir of the oxygen machine and the pounding of my heart in my ears. I was scared, he finally said, but that's not the real reason, and you deserve more than excuses. He looked at me then, not just with his eyes, but with something deeper, like he finally saw the wreckage his choices had left behind. I'll tell you the truth, he said, but it's not going to make anything better. I didn't nod. I didn't soften. I just waited. Because I didn't come for comfort. I came for the truth, even if it cracked me open all over again. He shifted in the bed, like every inch of movement hurt, his fingers twitching against the blanket, as if bracing for the weight of what he was about to say. I lied to myself for a long time, Raymond said, voice low, raspy. Told myself I left to protect you, that I was doing the noble thing, but that was just the story I could live with. I stayed silent. I wanted to shout. I wanted to scream. There is no version of abandoning your kids that's noble. But instead, I let the silence stretch, sharp and cutting. His gaze drifted to the window. You were 10. Jonah was what, 7? And your mom? Your mom was already barely holding on. I knew that. I flinched. Then why? Because I had a past, he said. Things I thought were behind me, but they weren't. Your grandfather, Diane's father, he found out. Said he'd expose everything. The arrest record, the juvenile stuff, the fight that nearly killed a man. All sealed, all forgotten. Until he dug it up like a dog with a bone. I stared at him. So what? You ran? To protect your image? He winced. I ran because he gave me a choice. He told me he'd ruin me in front of you, in front of Diane. Said he'd make sure you both knew the worst parts of me. I shook my head hard. So you left us to live in a fantasy version of you? You let us believe you were just an asshole who didn't care. Because that was better? Raymond looked back at me. I thought it was cleaner. Cleaner? My voice cracked. You let me hate you for 15 years. You let Jonah think you didn't love us. You let Mom fall apart. And all that time, the truth was you were just too proud to deal with your own mess. He nodded. He didn't defend himself. I kept writing, he said. I sent letters. Every birthday, every Christmas. After Mom told me to stay gone, I still tried. But I didn't push hard enough. I thought maybe one day you'd reach out and I'd explain everything, and it'd be okay. Diane didn't tell me about the letters, I whispered. She never said. I found them last week, in a locked drawer. He looked down at his hands. I didn't know that. I wondered why you never wrote back. Thought maybe you were right not to. You could have tried harder, I said, the fire rising in my throat. You could have come to a soccer game, a graduation, a funeral. You could have shown up. He nodded again, slowly, like each word from me was another stone on his chest. You're right. That caught me off guard. I expected a fight, a justification. But he just sat there, swallowing every accusation like he'd been starving for them. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said, almost too quiet to hear. I'm not that stupid. I wanted you to know it wasn't because I didn't love you. My throat clenched. Then what was it? He looked me dead in the eye. It was cowardice. I stared at him, this man who once seemed larger than life, who disappeared and took everything with him, now reduced to bones and regret. For the first time in my life, I saw him clearly, not as a villain, not as a father, just a man who chose wrong. I didn't cry, I didn't comfort him, I just sat there with the truth between us like shattered glass. Because sometimes that's the only closure you get. Not healing, not redemption, just the brutal honesty that should have come years ago. The room was too quiet after that. Not peaceful, just hollow, like a church after the sermon, when everyone's gone and the echo still lingers. I stood up, walked to the window, stared out at the parking lot. The cars. The rows of them, each one a life, a story. None of them mine. Not right now. Behind me, I heard him shift, wheeze a little. The machines beeped in time with his fading breath. "I never told you what really happened," he said, voice paper thin. I didn't turn around. "I left," he continued, "because your grandfather threatened to take you away. He said if I stayed, he'd make sure Diane filed for full custody, that he'd testify about everything I'd ever done. Said he'd paint me as a violent criminal. Said he'd show you who I used to be." I clenched my jaw. "I thought if I walked away, I'd spare you from seeing me like that," he said. "But the truth is, I was just afraid you'd believe him." I turned slowly. "You let your pride write our story." He nodded, shame hanging from his shoulders like lead. "Yeah, I did. You let me believe for 15 years that I wasn't worth staying for," I said. "That you woke up one day and decided your family wasn't enough. That I wasn't enough." He shut his eyes, and 2 tears slipped down his hollow cheeks. "You were more than enough. That's why it hurt too much to face you." "That's not love," I said. "That's cowardice in a costume." "I know," he whispered. "I know." I walked back to the chair, sat down, my hands folded tight in my lap to keep them from shaking. There was a moment then, a long, horrible moment, where neither of us spoke, and I thought, this is the part in the movies where he asks for forgiveness, where I cry, where we hug. But real life doesn't play nice with scripts. He didn't ask for forgiveness, and I didn't offer it. Instead, we just sat there. Him staring at the ceiling like it held the answers. Me watching the slow rise and fall of the man who used to carry me on his shoulders and then vanished like a bad magic trick. "I should have been better," he said finally. And I said nothing. Because he was right. Because the truth doesn't need applause. I didn't realize I was crying until I got back to my car. Silent tears sliding down my face like they'd been waiting in line behind every emotion I refused to name. I didn't drive. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too much. I just sat there, forehead against the steering wheel, breathing in ragged bursts and trying not to scream. It wasn't just the past that hurt. It was the now. Because even after all of it, the letters, the locked drawer, the apology scraped together from his deathbed, I still felt empty. Like the apology came too late to mean anything but noise. A dying man's Hail Mary tossed into a daughter's inferno. I checked into a motel off I-5, the kind with peeling paint and fluorescent lighting that made everything feel a little more unreal. I told the clerk I'd only need one night, paid in cash, and didn't bother to ask for Wi-Fi. The room smelled like old smoke and forgotten stories. I dropped my bag by the bed, kicked off my shoes, and collapsed face first into the stiff motel pillows. And then I sobbed. The kind of sobbing you can't fake. Ugly, raw, from the center of your chest, where all the parts are soft and unguarded. It wasn't just about him. It was about the girl I'd been. The one who waited. The one who stopped waiting. The one who became a mother herself and swore, never like that. Never again. I cried for all the birthdays where his name never came up, for every father-daughter dance I didn't go to, for Jonah, who hated him so loudly just to drown out the quiet ache of missing him, for my mom, who carried her bitterness like armor, never once admitting how heavy it had become. I cried because even after all my promises to myself, 1 hour, no emotion, no caretaking, I still walked into that room and let him crack something open. And now, I didn't know how to put it back. I screamed into the motel pillow until my throat burned, punched the mattress, kicked at the air, let myself fall apart in the least poetic way possible. Then I lay there, breath hitching, eyes swollen, and waited for sleep. It didn't come. Just the silence, just the wait, just the slow, sinking realization that this pain, was what closure really looked like. Not peace, just knowing and surviving it. Morning came like a thief, slipping through the blinds without permission. I hadn't really slept, just drifted in and out, tangled in motel sheets and old ghosts. My body ached in ways that had nothing to do with posture. Still, I got up. Still, I went back. Because something in me needed to see it through, needed to hear what he would say without the filters, without the pretense of reunion or redemption. He looked worse. The sharp lines of death were tracing his face more boldly now. Skin drawn tight, lips cracked, eyes sunk so deep I wasn't sure they could still see. But when I walked in, he turned toward me, and a flicker of something, recognition, hope, maybe fear, lit his face. "You came back," he croaked. I didn't sit. "Say what you need to say," I told him. Not as my father, not expecting anything from me, just as a man. He blinked slowly, then nodded. He didn't ask for forgiveness, not even once. He said, "You didn't deserve the silence." That was it. No justifications. No tidy ribbon of regret. Just the one sentence that wrapped itself around my ribs and squeezed. "I wasn't strong enough to be what you needed," he said. "I should have been. I wish I had been, but I wasn't. And that's on me. You don't owe me anything, not your time, not your presence, not even this moment. But thank you for giving it anyway." I stared at him, this man who had fractured so many of my foundations, who had disappeared when I was a child and reappeared just to die in front of me. And for the first time, I didn't see a villain. I saw a broken man, small, tired, human. "You're right," I said. "I don't owe you anything." He nodded, slow, like every syllable was a kindness he never expected. "I just wanted to see your face," he whispered, closing his eyes. Before the end. I stood there a while longer, not as his daughter, just as someone who had finally been given the truth. And that, strangely, was enough. Not for healing, but for the quiet that follows after. I don't know when it happened, maybe somewhere between the second apology and the third silence, but I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Not like before. The rage had burned off like morning fog, leaving only something quiet in its place. Not forgiveness, just space. He was still alive, barely, but I could feel it in the room, the nearness of the end, the way time stretched thin, like old fabric threatening to tear. He didn't say much after that. His breaths were labored. His eyes fluttered open and shut, like he was halfway between here and somewhere else. But I stayed, not to comfort him, not to reconcile, but because something in me needed to see it, to witness what he had become, not the monster I had constructed out of hurt, not the hero I once begged the stars to send back, but just a man, flawed, failing, finite. And seeing that, really seeing it, lifted something. Because monsters have power. So do myths. But this man, this frail, sunken version of Raymond Cole, he didn't hold any more keys to my pain. He didn't get to be the reason I guarded my heart, or flinched at father-daughter dances, or stared too long at empty chairs during school events. He was just a man who made a terrible choice, and I was just a woman who lived through it. I stood by the window and looked out over the hospital parking lot, watching strangers come and go, living lives untouched by mine. I imagined myself in one of those cars, driving home, picking up Ellie, making dinner, folding laundry, laughing, living. And for the first time since the call, I believed I could. Not because he said the right words, not because he earned it, but because I no longer needed anything from him. Not love, not validation, not even an explanation. He gave me nothing for so long, and now, by seeing him for who he truly was, I'd finally found everything I needed: distance, perspective, and a peace that didn't ask permission. He asked me to stay. Voice trembling, eyes dull. The kind of ask that feels more like a plea than a question. "Just a few days," he whispered, "till it's over." I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just looked at him, and for the first time, I wasn't the girl hoping he'd come back. I was the woman who had raised herself. I can't, I said softly. Not cruel, just final. His eyes searched mine, like maybe there was still a sliver of the daughter he left behind tucked away somewhere. But if there was, she didn't answer him. I have a daughter, I said. She's 6. She needs me home. He closed his eyes, nodded slowly. No argument, just the sound of breath trying to outrun time. She's lucky, he said after a moment. No, I replied. She's safe, because I made sure of it. That was the difference. I hadn't just survived what he left behind. I rebuilt from it. Better, stronger, unbroken in all the places that mattered. I hope she never has to ask why, he murmured. The way you did. She won't, I said, my voice steady. Because I don't disappear. I don't let silence raise my child. I didn't hold his hand. I didn't offer warmth or ritual. I just stood there a minute longer, memorizing the truth of him, the weakness, the regret, the empty echo of what could have been. Then I turned, and I walked out. Each step was weightless. Each step said, I'm not who you left. I'm who I chose to become. And I am not staying. Not for this. Not for you. The hallway outside his room felt colder than when I entered. The air sharper, like the hospital's ventilation system had conspired to strip me of any lingering sentimentality. My footsteps echoed, too loud, too firm. But I didn't soften them. Not anymore. I passed a nurse pushing a cart of medication. She glanced at me, offered a tight smile. I returned nothing, just kept walking. Down the corridor, past the vending machines, past the waiting rooms where families whispered and phones buzzed with updates. The further I got from his room, the lighter my chest felt. Not empty, just clearer. I stepped outside into the California sun, and it was like stepping out of a cave. The sky didn't know anything about regret. The trees didn't care who had apologized too late. Everything moved like it always had. Cars in the lot, birds overhead, wind through the hedges, unconcerned with the drama I'd carried in. I stood in the parking lot and tilted my face to the light, closed my eyes. It wasn't relief, exactly. It was survival. It was standing in the aftermath and realizing you're still upright. I got in the car, shut the door, sat in the driver's seat with both hands on the wheel, and let the silence wrap around me like a weighted blanket. But this time, it wasn't suffocating. This time, it was mine. There was no rush to go, no urgency to call anyone, no shaking hands, just a stillness that felt earned. I started the engine and pulled out, slow and steady, like I wasn't fleeing anything, because I wasn't. I wasn't running. I was leaving the man who vanished, leaving the version of myself that kept looking over her shoulder for him. I took the long way out of Sacramento, through old neighborhoods that looked like pieces of memory stretched thin by time. I passed a gas station we once stopped at when I was 9. He bought me a root beer and a plastic bracelet from a gumball machine. I used to wear it like it meant something. It didn't. Not anymore. Every mile I put between us, the breath in my lungs got easier, the wheel under my hands steadier. I wasn't crying. I wasn't angry. I wasn't broken. I was something else entirely. I was done. By the time I hit the highway, the sun had begun its slow descent, washing the road in gold. I rolled the windows down and let the wind undo the knot that had lived at the base of my spine for 15 years. And with every gust, with every breath, I whispered a little louder. I lived through this. Not survived. Lived. Not because he asked for it. Not because he earned it. Because I did. Because I kept going. Through the silence. Through the ache. Through every single day he wasn't there. I left him behind with my spine straight and my heart intact. And that, finally, was enough. Ellie's arms wrapped around my legs before I even had the chance to take off my shoes. "Mommy!" she squealed. burying her face in my thigh like she hadn't just spent the weekend with Callie being doted on and spoiled. I dropped my bag, sank to my knees, and pulled her in. She smelled like apple juice and sidewalk chalk, like spring and safety, and everything good I'd ever done. She pulled back just enough to look at me. I missed you. I missed you more, I whispered, pressing my forehead to hers. She grinned. That's not possible. And maybe it wasn't. Callie hovered in the doorway behind her, arms crossed, eyes scanning me for signs of emotional collapse. I shook my head slightly, and she relaxed. No words needed. After she left, Ellie and I curled up on the couch, her head on my chest, her fingers playing with the necklace I always wore. The tiny gold one with her initials. She told me about her adventures at the park, how she made a new best friend named Harper, who liked the same snack crackers, how they built a fairy kingdom out of rocks and leaves. I listened, really listened, not with half my mind in the past, or my body still coiled from grief, but fully, presently, as if the air itself had shifted and made space for something new, something whole. Later, while she napped, I sat at the kitchen table, the quiet house breathing around me. I thought about Sacramento, about the hospital room, the apology, the truth too long in coming, and I felt it settle inside me like a stone in still water, not jagged anymore, just there. He was dying, maybe already gone by now, and I wasn't with him. I was here, where I belonged. That night, I tucked Ellie into bed and lingered longer than usual. She clutched her stuffed giraffe, eyes heavy but still watching me. "Mommy," she murmured, half asleep, "you'll always come back, right?" I smoothed her hair, kissed her cheek. Always! Because I would. Every single time. No matter how hard the road, no matter what ghosts tried to rise, I would always come back, for her. And in that promise, I found the thing I'd been chasing without knowing it. Not forgiveness, not peace, but purpose. I turned off her light, stepped into the hallway, and closed the door behind me with a soft click. The past had finally stopped following me, and I didn't need to look back anymore. I burned the letter that night, not because I hated him, not because I needed revenge or drama or some grand symbolic gesture, but because it was time. I stood in the backyard, Ellie asleep upstairs, stars pricked through the night sky like shy witnesses. The air smelled like damp grass and wood smoke. I held the letter in both hands, one of the last he'd written, the one I found at 17, unopened, buried in that locked drawer. The one that started, "I know you probably hate me," and ended with a sketch of a dog that looked like it belonged in a cartoon. I read it once more. Then I lit a match. The paper caught quick, flame racing across his words like they were running for cover. I watched it curl and blacken, watched the past eat itself in silence. It wasn't anger that filled me. It wasn't triumph. It was something quieter. Like placing flowers on a grave. Like turning off the porch light you'd left on for someone who was never coming home. This was her funeral. The girl who waited. The one who checked the mailbox every birthday, hoping for something, anything, from the man who left. The one who told people she was fine when she was fraying. The one who carried silence like a family heirloom. She was gone now, and in her place stood a woman who knew the truth and no longer needed it to hurt. The ashes scattered in the breeze, lifting like smoke toward the sky. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood there until it was done. Then I went inside. The house was quiet, safe, mine. I curled up on the couch, pulled a blanket around me, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something was missing. The cycle ended with me, and I wasn't afraid of the quiet anymore.